Welcome to Calvary Conversations. My name is Mariah, and I'm here with Pastor Craig Roders.
What's up?
Our guest today is the writer, director, and editor of the documentary film that we'll be discussing today, Silent Cry, Darker Side of Trafficking. He works with Skywatch TV as a documentary filmmaker. He is also an author of numerous best-selling books, including Afterlife, The Second Coming of the New Age with Stephen Bancars, and many more. He is also the founder of the Daily Renegade, where he hosts the Peck Report. It's my honor and privilege to welcome Josh Peck. Josh, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to talk with you both.
So before we get started, do you want to pray for us, Dad?
Yes. Father, I just thank you for Josh and for all his work and just for him stepping out. Like he said, he was kind of new at doing movies, but he stepped out and learned on the internet, and you just blessed him, Lord. And I just pray, even though this is a very dark topic, and it's a topic a lot of people don't want to talk about, as Paul said, our job is to expose darkness.
Amen.
And so, God, I thank you for Josh. I thank you for being bold and stepping out. I pray you'll bless him and protect him, Lord, as we know that this is really not fighting against Epstein or people like him, but it's really spiritual powers, and it's the demonic powers that are really doing this, that want to steal, kill, and destroy young lives. And so, God, and all lives. So we just pray, we dedicate this podcast to you, and we ask, as your word says, whatever you dedicate or commit to the Lord, it shall be established. Use this powerfully to minister to people maybe who are struggling with pornography, or maybe people who have know someone who's been a part of this. We just ask that, God, you would set the captives free. You'd set the kids free, as we're going to hear today, some alarming statistics of numbers of kids that are being dragged into this. And we pray that you would use the church and Christians to rise up, to pray, to expose the darkness, to speak to their congressmen, their senators, and to say, we need to do something about this. And as Josh Peck shared today, it goes all the way up to the highest offices of power. And we just ask that you would expose the darkness, that you would shout from the rooftop what is going on, and you expose even people that seem like they're untouchable. We thank you that greater is Christ who is in us than he is in the world. And we just pray that you would just guide our tongues, and that everything we say would just glorify you, that would be used by you to set captives free.
Yes.
And to expose this terrible atrocity that's happening in America and throughout the world. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Well, we are very blessed to have you and thankful for people like you who want to, like my dad was praying, expose the darkness. And so you were the writer, director, and producer of Silent Cry, is that correct?
Writer, director, and
Editor.
editor. Tom Horn and Joe Horn at Skywatch TV, they were the producers.
Well, that is amazing, first of all. But also, we just want to say that our family, we watched Silent Cry, and it was very well done. A lot of times we watch Christian documentaries, and they can kind of be cheesy or whatever, but it was very well done. And we are also very blessed because throughout it, we cried, we were inspired, also we had hope. So it had all of that. Just the stories were amazing, the guests were amazing. So could you share with our listeners why you wrote Silent Cry, and also maybe share why you had certain guests on for Silent Cry, the darker side of sex trafficking?
And is
trafficking.
this, Josh, was this your first movie?
The first time.
Because you've edited a lot.
Yep.
You're an editor, right?
Skywatch.
You did editing, but this is your first full, so that's great. So right out of the box, that was a pretty awesome movie.
Amen.
So that's crazy. I mean, not pretty. That was awesome.
Oh, thank you.
It was amazing. So.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, so Silent Cry, for those not familiar, it does deal with child sex trafficking, but it's not the typical trafficking documentary. And a lot of before I did this film, I watched every documentary I could find on child sex trafficking. I watched big budget ones, I watched independent ones, and everything in between. And a lot of them, had a lot of strong points, and then there were some other points that I thought could be done a little differently. So many of them deal with just like cold hard facts, logical statistics, and they kind of stick with that. And also, for some reason, they tend to have on a lot of guests to speak, like sometimes as many as 20 or 30.
So,
and to me, and that probably, I'm not criticizing that too much. It's good to have a lot of people speaking about this. I'm glad that there's that many people that are aware of it, that can speak about it. And I'm glad that the statistics are available out there. So I'm not criticizing it too much, but for me, there was some things missing. I was missing like the human element. I like having, especially for a really dark topic like this, I liked the idea of having a smaller cast. So there's only 7 experts in Silent Cry. So it does deal with child sex trafficking, and it does get into statistics, but that's not what the movie is built around. The movie is built around some more of the human elements. We have a survivor of child sex trafficking, Alanka Deaton, who's in the film. She tells her whole story. We have a Hollywood insider, David Heavener, who's been working in Hollywood for years, and he talks about some of the things that he's seen, but he's even had some things in his personal life. His cousin was brutally murdered and, well, abused first and then murdered, and so we put his story in there, and he's convinced that there was a satanic connection with that. So that's the other part that makes Silent Cry different than the others, is I have yet to see a child sex trafficking documentary that deals with the supernatural side of this, because really this is a spiritual war. I mean, it does manifest in our physical world for sure, and I would never go as far as to give these abusers the excuse of the devil made me do it. We're not talking about that. Everyone has free will. Everyone's in control of their own actions. But behind these physical manifestations that we see in the world, there is a spiritual darkness driving this whole thing. Sometimes it's evident because there are satanic circles that will use children for sacrifice and things. Now, that is a lower percentage. There's a lower percentage of that than just general child sex trafficking. So sometimes it's evident in those types of ways, and then other times not so much. Sometimes it's not as evident because to us, typically in our materialistic modern world, it just looks like the depravity of the human heart, or it's just a physical addiction or something. So what we talk about in the film is how it actually goes deeper than that. Ephesians 6 tells us that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, and all this dark spiritual wickedness that's running rampant through the world. So we really do hit on that. Now, while saying that, I want to tell the audience that this is not a sensational movie. So we don't sugarcoat it either. I mean, we don't hold back, but we don't sensationalize just for the sake of sensationalism. And that was some other things that I've noticed on specifically some YouTube videos that deal with this topic. They will go straight for the sensational stuff because they know that it's going to get views. And while some of that is true, there's a lot of sensationalism that I frankly don't know if it's true or not, because there's no way to lend any evidence towards it. So that kind of stuff I left out of the movie. I wanted to produce something where people can watch it for the first time and they can trust the information in there. So and they can also look at the links, the references that we put in the movie, and go and check out this information for themselves, because there is a lot of things in here where I try to be extremely honest about when something can be verified by some type of publication or some statistic or some figure somewhere, or when something is an eyewitness testimony. So we have both in there, and I try to be like, I am very honest in the movie about which is which. I don't want to conflate the two. So we talked a little bit about the rampant occultism that's tied with trafficking, that it's not focused on unsubstantiated conspiracy theory and wild claims, but it does go where no other movie goes before. So the small cast, you asked about who's in it. We have Jaco Booyens. He is a previous guest on Skywatch TV, the ministry that I work for. He directed and produced the feature film 8 Days, which people can find on Amazon as well. And he did that to raise awareness about the reality of sex trafficking in the United States. He's the founder of Share Together, which is where we get some of the stats in the movie. But that's a nonprofit organization fighting against the global crisis of sex trafficking. We have his sister, Alanka Deaton. She's a survivor of child sex trafficking. She tells her whole story in the film. Jaco actually was one of the ones that helped rescue her from sex trafficking. It's amazing story. So we put that right in the beginning of the film. I told you a little bit about David Heavener. We also have Stephen Bancars. He's co-author of mine. We wrote the book, The Second Coming of the New Age, together. And so he has a background. We both come out of like New Age occultism, and we're both Christians now. But he's an investigative researcher. And as it had turned out, he had been researching researching this topic specifically for about a year before we finished the film. So he was a really good guest to have in there. Thomas Dunn, who's a filmmaker and director of Detestable, which can also be found on Amazon. He's an advocate of victims of satanic ritual abuse, and he also works with other experts to assist people coming out of SRA, helping them to adjust to normal life. And then we have Joe Horn and Tom Horn. They are both the producers of the film, and they're also guests in the film. And they help run Whispering Ponies Ranch, which is a ministry dedicated to helping children heal after being rescued from sex trafficking and abuse. And so they help run that. And I want to mention real quick, too, if people get the movie, they can get it at skywatchtvstore.com, or they can get it on Amazon. Wherever they get it, if they get the movie, all the profits of Silent Cry, all the profits that come in from this movie will go to Whispering Ponies Ranch to help these kids who have been rescued from sex trafficking. So I'm not in this for my own fame or fortune. It's specifically
also, Josh, right? I mean, I was watching last night Skywatch. If you order it, I don't know if it's still available, but for like $35 donation, you'll get like 5, right? I think it's like 135 or I think maybe 200. I don't know what it is. A huge value. But I was like going, man, I wish I hadn't bought it on Amazon. I wish I would have bought the whole thing because it was like so many things. Now I have to. Now I already spent $10. And I got to spend. No, but I wish I would have known that. So I really want to tell the listeners that it's really a great value, and you get a lot of bonus stuff. Right, 5 DVDs, and that's really cool. Hey, can I ask you this? I don't mean to get off topic, but I mean it's on topic. But go ahead. But you had Ashton Kutcher, whatever his name, on there talking about it. I'm thinking he's part of the problem, right? How did he get? What do you know the backstory on that?
So what's included in the movie is a news clip from ABC News about him talking about trafficking, and I forget his organization's name at the moment, but he runs an organization that helps kids get rescued from trafficking, and he works with like state departments, I believe, in the government and stuff. So that was a hearing in front of Congress or something where he was, I believe, if I have the context right, he was looking for funding for a project to help, because he was saying that he was having government officials ask him for help because the government doesn't have the technology to be able to find out where these kids are. And so he was working with some other tech experts and things to develop technology. So he was asking for help. But in that he shares his testimony of some of the things that he's seen. And I mean, it's horrific. So I wanted to include that in the movie because
did he see that like as being a Hollywood guy? Someone showed him that. I mean, because he said he saw a video, so someone probably was saying, "Hey, this is cool." Or how did he see that?
Well, no. I think he saw it through the technology that he developed. Because I forget what it's called, but he and Demi Moore financially backed some company or worked with some tech people, and they developed a way to be able to help track kids that were involved in trafficking, that were kidnapped, and they were able to somehow get cameras in places. And I don't know exactly how it all works, but that's what he was talking about, that through their covert investigations and stuff, they actually saw some of these abuses happen and helped rescue the kids out of there.
I didn't mean to bring that up, but I just thought like it was shocking that someone like Ashton Kutcher, he would be kind of exposing that. I thought, wow, that's pretty. I would not think of him being someone like that, but it's pretty amazing. So that someone in Hollywood would
I'm hoping. Yeah, definitely. I'm hoping we see more of that. I think the more that the culture shifts towards wanting to protect children, I think the more celebrities will start to see. I mean, there are most of them that just aren't going to do it because they're elites and they only care about themselves and they really don't like kids anyway. That's typically how a lot of them are. But I think we're going to see more. I mean, we even have we didn't have him in the film. I invited him, but we just couldn't make it work with COVID travel restrictions. But Kevin Sorbo, he's been out there, big pro-life advocate, standing up for the rights of unborn children. He's been on the front lines of that fight for years now, and he's a pretty well-known name. So I think as time goes on, the more the culture shifts towards wanting to protect children, I think we're going to see more celebrities like that. I hope so anyway.
Well, like you said, it goes up high in government, goes up high probably in Hollywood, so it's probably a really touchy thing, right? I mean, you don't, right? I mean, it's not good to be a conservative or somebody who stands up for truth in Hollywood, probably, in the government. So
and that's what we want to talk about too, because in the film, you had a part where it was talking about the finders. And so we want for you to share more about that and how we really can't always just rely on the government. Like, they'll take care of sex trafficking. They'll take care of that. That's why I love it how Uni say, no, it starts with the families and those individuals. So can you share about who the finders were and what that is in the film?
Yeah, definitely. And I opened the film with this specifically because of what you just said. Too many people, and I think this is why trafficking has been allowed to grow kind of underground the way that it has, into like a multi-billion-dollar business at this point, or at least multi-million. But I think a lot of people think, okay, I'm going to vote for the right guy, and then that's it. You know, then I can, for the next 4 years or so, I can just relax, watch TV, go to work, you know, and it's all good. But we can't trust the government to solve this problem, because regardless who's in power, and I'll say, like, our current president is doing a lot more than the last president did with this issue. So that's good to see, but he's also fighting an uphill battle, and he doesn't have very many people that are loyal to him. So, and he's not going to be president forever. So a lot of people think that we can look to the government, but the establishment government, the people who don't have term limits and they're really in there forever, they seem to have a standing interest in keeping this thing going. And the Finders case was probably the best example in recent history to actually prove that, because usually when I say that, people think, well, that's conspiracy theory, I'm checking out, you know, I don't have to listen to that. And they use it almost as an excuse, because I think when people hear that, they think, okay, something's coming, I'm going to have to do something, I don't want to do something, it's conspiracy theory, now I can turn it off and you know, not have to do anything. But if people will stick with me, you'll see there's nothing theoretical about this. This actually happened. It's documented. It's proven by the FBI documents themselves, which anybody can go on the FBI Vault website right now and look these up. But or they can just get the movie, because we pieced it all together, and we actually show the documents on the screen so people can follow along. But basically what the Finders were, or possibly are, in 2018, 2019, the FBI declassified nearly 650 heavily redacted pages relating to this mysterious group called the Finders cult. And those documents contain evidence that the State Department and CIA was at best complicit. At best, they just kind of looked the other way and allowed it, but at worst, directly involved and conspired to cover up an investigation and charges against this group. So in 1987, this is what the public was told. The official story was in 1987, in Tallahassee, a woman saw 6 malnourished children with 2 well-dressed men at a park. Something didn't seem right, so she called the police. And then 2 weeks after that call was made, the entire case was dropped. Not much information was released about it. It was largely forgotten until just recently. Now, there have been a few really smart researchers that have looked into this since then, but it hasn't been, we haven't been able to substantiate anything that these researchers have said up until the release of these documents. So now that we have these documents 30 years later and they're finally released, there's still a lot we don't know, because again, it is heavily redacted, but from what we can piece together just based on what the documents say, we can show there was definitely a cover-up. So we do tell the whole story in the movie. We can hit on some of the highlights here. The police brought the 2 men and children into custody. The 2 men were uncooperative. They didn't provide ID for themselves or the kids. They were unable to prove that the children even belonged to them. And while they were in custody, it was discovered that there was another strange case like this in DC, and in DC they called these people the Finders. So that's Tallahassee, they adopted that name. Now, police had searched properties belonging to the Finders and found hand-drawn pentagrams. They found over 100 animal bones, and there was other undisclosed pieces of evidence of satanic cult rituals. We don't know what those are because redacted and they were undisclosed, and there was a lot of cover-up here. But they also found cages that witnesses said were used to keep children in during their visits. So there was actual eyewitness testimony of the abuse of children here. But it goes a lot deeper. On those properties were found documents relating to obtaining children, impregnating women, the purchasing, kidnapping, and trading of children. So the government documents that we can look at now expressed a suspicion that the finders were actually being used by the U.S. government on a state and federal level, because a member of the finders was discovered, named Isabella, to have worked for the U.S. government from 1950 to 1971. And this would have been with the government's knowledge, so this wasn't like a covert thing. So there are investigators mentioned in the documents, though names have been redacted, who became absolutely convinced that the finders were part of an organized child abuse scheme that was being covered up by the State Department and FBI's Foreign Counterintelligence
and they were doing,
intelligence section.
Now, Josh, they were doing, I don't mean to interrupt, but they were also, as you said, right, they were justified in a sense because they were being used by the CIA to cause confusion to other groups or something?
Right. And so these kids were actually medically examined too, because people wonder, where's the proof of child abuse? And so we do get into that in the film, because when the police questioned those children, they said some strange things like, at our house there's women walking around naked, and there was this leader that they had called the Game Caller. His real name was Marion Petty, and he would tell the kids to do weird things like read and record like random bulletin boards, take notes, and even babysit children, which is pretty disturbing. But during the interview, the children were really malnourished. They were not well. They were extremely hungry, and they were so sick that they actually urinated and defecated on the floor. So because of that, the children were medically examined, and at least two of them, named Max and Mary, were confirmed cases of sexual abuse. Now, the details and evidence of the sexual abuse are probably too explicit for a show such as this, but we do include the full details in the movie, not for sensationalistic purposes, but just to stay true to the documents and show that the documents do record exactly what was done to these kids, and it is pretty horrific.
And like you said,
but even worse. And
like you said, though, Josh, that was enough. What you do say in the movie, that should have done an investigation, but it was just dropped like weeks later, and that shows something's a cover up.
Yeah, even worse than just being dropped. It was covered up, and we can actually prove that, which we do in the film, because there was a form detailing the abuse, and this came directly from the medical examination, and it has an original date of February 4th, 1987, and we even know so much about it. We know a copy of that was made February 9th, 1987, to be sent somewhere. But on February 18th, so this would have been 2 weeks after the confirmation of sexual abuse was discovered, the whole case was called off. The finder's case was dropped. No arrests made. The two men had all charges against them dropped. The children were even sent back with no attempts at rehabilitation or foster care. Even worse, an affidavit written either on or after February 5th, so this would have been a day or more after the child sex abuse was discovered. This affidavit stated that the children were all examined for sexual abuse, but the results were not available at this time, even though we have clear evidence that it was. They actually said that it actually states that there was no evidence of child sexual exploitation, no evidence of kidnapping or related crimes, no evidence of satanic activity, and they got away with it at the time. But now that we have these documents, we can prove that there was evidence, and that the claim that there wasn't any was just an outright lie. It was also reported that the lifestyle choices of the finders were subjective, and that there was nothing objectively wrong, abusive, or neglectful, even though the police and medical reports show that they were starved, they were being withheld medical attention, and they were sexually abused. Now, in the documents, we even get some comments from investigators who were clearly quite upset that some shadowy higher up was shutting this investigation down, and we even have notes from those investigators about their suspicions. So while all of this evidence was ignored from the top down, and these police officers were told to shut this case down, in the documents is speculation from someone who appears to be close to the case, who expressed his suspicions in an official report from the domestic security branch of the police department in D.C. So he writes that he believed the finders were utilized by the CIA as a disinformation service. He says that they are capable of destructive and illegal activities. He refers to them as a cult. He says that he doesn't believe the sexual abuse of children was originally planned but sprung up later due to sick and demented subjects who belong to the cult, which means that when this was happening, the government was turning a blind eye to it. The government was getting more from this finders cult cooperation they had with them that they looked the other way on the sexual abuse. It was either that or they were complicit. They were involved with it themselves. This investigator believed that the shaping of the children was a planned experiment, such as the Nazis. He actually compares it to that, towards a perfect society. He also said that he didn't believe that the finders ever disbanded, which makes us wonder, are they still active in the government today? And it also makes us wonder what horrific levels of corruption are going on in the government now that won't be released for another 30 years. So this shows us, to kind of wrap all that up, this shows us why we can't trust the government to protect our children. Again, Trump is doing some amazing things to end trafficking, but unfortunately, he's a fluke. He's very outside the norm. He can't fight this by himself, and he isn't going to be president forever. So by and large, the establishment, the people who really are in the government forever, they at best want nothing to do with this fight, and at worst, and unfortunately in many circumstances, they want to perpetuate more trafficking in their own twisted self-interests. So this is why the finders was covered up, and this is why a lot of things today are covered up, such as secret information regarding Jeffrey Epstein, some of which is just now coming to light.
Well, Josh, one thing I want to say, I saw you weren't on the show, but it was on Skywatch with Tom Horn, and I forget the other guy with the goatee, but he said that they even had, and I don't know if you confirmed this or you heard this, but they said they even had an escort showing someone in the White House with George H.W. Bush. Do you know what I'm talking about? So they're saying even that, like they were mentioning that, and I was like, what? I never heard that before, but they were saying how, and I remember I'm with Tony Perkins with the Family Research Council, where they were saying prostitution was like only blocks away from the White House. So we know, and then there was that escort lady, I forget her name, a couple of years back, who had all these congressmen and senators that used her service. So, sex, sells and sex.
Yeah.
So, like you said it well, if there wasn't people high up in Hollywood and government, finance, that, and with Epstein, you have the guy from Victoria's Secrets, all those things, that we would probably take a bigger bite out of it. But a lot of the people that are supposed to be exposing this, right, lawmakers, are the ones participating. So that's why you have hidden, I think like the Kennedy assassination, where it's hidden for 30 years, 50 years. You're like, okay, that's because all the people are dead by the time you get the information. It's kind of should tell us something that's a little weird, that right when we're supposed to be about
definitely
truth,
Yeah.
Well, the good thing about it, too, is these guys that are involved in this, these people, they're cowards and they're spineless. And if there's enough pushback, see, there are a select few. There are some good people in government that are aware of this stuff and they hate it. They just don't know how to fight back, because the second they do, they'll either get murdered or lose their job, or they could be running, risk to their families. And so that kind of thing does happen, which I think that was part of the Epstein thing.
Josh, I wanted to ask you this. Have you had any pushback? Since you're exposing huge darkness, and you're speaking, like you said, not sensationally, but you're speaking the truth. Have you, because that's the thing, right? What do they say? Edmund Burke, only thing for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And it's like, you can feel, have you, because I think, man, you guys, your Skywatch channel is so intense and so out there. You don't see very many ministries like this, so I applaud you on that. We try to be like that. But I think of myself as a pretty bold person, but when you're fighting the CIA and all, and these people could be involved, they can do stuff. I don't know if you saw the movie Red, but they can do things that they can make it look like, hey, you just had a little accident. Have you had anything that you can share that's kind of been a little icky or a little weird, or have you been protected totally by the Lord?
The most I've had, I haven't had anything that I know of from the government or anything weird like that. I haven't noticed anybody like following me around, or there hasn't been like anything like that. The only kind of pushback that I've had, like in our circles, in this type of, sometimes it's called fringe Christianity or whatever we want to call it, but this type of Christianity where we actually want to talk about issues, and not kind of hide behind our dogmas and say, in our tradition. And nothing wrong with dogma and tradition, but to use that to say, well, we that's not something we're going to talk about. With us Christians who actually want to talk about this, I haven't had any pushback whatsoever. Everybody's been great. Everybody's been having me on their shows. Where I have gotten pushback, though, is I have some friends in mainstream conservatism who have huge audiences, in the millions, and some of these people I've had on my show, and this was the first time that I've really tried to get on their show, because I've known that a lot of the stuff that I talk about typically isn't going to mesh well with their audience, because they're not talking about UFOs or aliens or New Age, or they're not talking about that. They're mainly talking about like what's going on in current events from a conservative viewpoint. So finally, I had something where this film, we can talk about child sex trafficking. They're on their channels. They're dealing with this. They're talking about it consistently, and so I figured it'd be a good fit. But I have actually been told by these mainstream conservative hosts they can't have me on because they'll ruin their own credibility. That's what they're afraid of. That's the pushback that I got. And to be honest, I kind of lost some respect for my friends who have said that, because it's like, where are you losing credibility? If anything, I will lose credibility, but I'm okay with that, because they could have me on and just say like, hey, I don't believe in this satanic stuff at all, but let's talk about some of the statistics with child sex trafficking. There's ways to do it. Or not
all of you shared in the show are necessarily our views, right?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I would think that they would know me well enough now to know that I know how to speak to different audiences, and if I was to go on those, I just would not talk about the satanic stuff at all. But that was the reason. Now, if it was something where it was, we just don't talk about that on the show, that our audience isn't really geared towards that, fine, I totally get it. But if the reason is I will lose credibility if I have you on, to me, it's like, well, why? For one thing, why is that an issue? Because I will gladly sacrifice my credibility for kids as long as I know what I'm speaking is truth.
We're supposed to be truth tellers.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. As long as I'm speaking truth and I'm confident of that, then I don't care about my credibility. I'm not gonna play it safe and sugarcoat things just so I can gain a larger audience. And that actually, and there have been times in the past where that has hurt me. I've lost an entire YouTube channel that had like 80,000 subscribers to it, and YouTube deleted it probably because we were talking about Jesus too much or something like that.
So you've been shadow banned by.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. On my other channel, I cannot gain a subscriber to save my life. It has been stuck at 2,000 just for months and months and months. So that kind of thing happens. The censorship online, whenever I talk about this, Facebook, Twitter, especially YouTube, these corporations will shadow ban. They'll restrict views for sure. I can post a picture of my cat and I'll get hundreds of comments on that.
That's important stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. But if I put something like hashtag silent cry or hashtag save the children, I'm lucky if I get like 10 or like a dozen views, then that I'm lucky.
Why don't we
start?
That kind of thing happens. Why don't we start our own? Sure. Everyone says you can't compete with Google, but why don't people like Trump and Pence, people that have money and power? Why don't we start a truth tube or something? It's like, because it's just ridiculous. It's like, we know they're doing this, and we know if Biden and Harris, God forbid, get in, I mean you got Glenn Beck and you got people like Ben Shapiro saying this is going to be a thing of the past. We're going to be you're going to have to go to a .com because you can't get us. Should be. We're supposed to engage the society. I was talking to Charlie Kirk. We were talking to him, and he was saying you got to engage. But I'm thinking, eventually, I don't know how your eschatology is, but it's going to get worse before it gets better. So shouldn't we be trying to get
absolutely.
Like you're doing a Skywatch, but try to get some real channels to where we don't have to worry about being shadow banned,
Yeah, and there are a few. The issue is it takes a long time to build these because how do you advertise? Any advertising that happens today is through Google. Google owns everything. If you're like a video thing and like there's there are alternate YouTubes, but how do you get the word out? Because when I try, and I am on a couple of them, like BitChute and things like that, but when you try to share a video, you can't even share a YouTube video, not really, on Facebook, because they don't like the competition. So Facebook, Google, YouTube, and Twitter, all together, they kind of own the space. So when somebody does start something new, it's incredibly difficult for them to find people to use their service because they can't advertise. We found this a little bit with Daily Renegades. So when I lost my channel, actually, even before that, when YouTube started deleting my videos, my son has leukemia, and I did a short 6-minute mini documentary about it, and I put that up on YouTube, and YouTube deleted it. And it's because I had other videos that are Christian in nature and conservative. And I'm not, but So when that started happening, I'm thinking they will go as far as to delete a video trying to tell people about a kid with leukemia. Like, that is low. I decided I got to build my own thing, but in order to do that, it's incredibly expensive. So we have a subscription service at dailyrenegade.com where I put all of my videos, and I have a few other hosts that they do their own videos. It's good biblical theology. It's kind of in line with the way that Calvary Chapel does stuff, which I love, where it's kind of, verse by verse, line by line, and you just really dig into the scripture and see what it says. We have shows like that. We have like documentary series on there. We have regular kind of just talking head shows like what we're doing here. We have interview shows. We have a lot of stuff, but we're trying to be like the Netflix of like fringe Christian kind of things. So we do have that, but again, it's hard to advertise and forum. Exactly.
The thing also is, like, not to get off topic, my daughter gets all mad.
Oh, no, you're fine.
But like Pizzagate, I looked that up.
That's what we're going to talk about next.
We're going to talk about next. But Pizzagate, you look it up on YouTube, it goes, "Oh, this has been debunked. A bunch of freaks believe this." Well, I mean, not they'll say freaks, but they say debunked. Like, this is totally debunked. It's not true. And I mean, boy, I was thinking, like, besides being, kind of blackballed and shadow banned, I mean, it's basically like, well, if you want to believe this crazy nut, Josh Peck, stuff. I mean, it's just that's got to be so hard when you have proof and you're trying to be so
documents.
Credible. You back it up with paper. And people say, "Oh, you're not." I mean, it's like you said. How do you fight Google when they say sorry, or YouTube? This guy's crazy. I mean, man, you're fighting you're like trying to put your finger in the dike with 25 cracks. So
yeah.
Oh, yeah, because what they'll do is they'll find one very sensational claim in something, and they'll debunk that, and then they'll paint the whole thing with that one sensational thing. They'll say the whole thing was debunked. So with Pizzagate, they'll find one thing, like there were some very sensational things with Pizzagate
they showed the shooting. They said, "See, these guys, this guy came in, see what happens when you do this, when you fake news." And
exactly.
And so it's like, you're a guy, like, we had Gabrielle Giffords here in Tucson get shot, and they said it was Rush Limbaugh's fault. I mean, it's like, yet the liberals will have, you see him in a restaurant, you go after him, you stop him, but that's all right, that's cool. But you say something of truth, and it's your fault that some guy, a nut, went in there and shot. I mean, it's like,
well,
not an even playing
that's
field.
why it's so. Exactly, and that's why it's so important to always post things that are truthful, at least to the best of our ability. And if we don't know if it's truth, then we need to say so. I should mention, too, since we're on the topic of Pizzagate, with the movie, if people get it at skywatchtvstore.com, we made a bonus documentary specifically about Pizzagate 2020. So what, now that we're about 4 years out from the Pizzagate scandal, what can we know today? What are the newest developments in it? What's real? It's actually called Fake News or Hidden Truths. And we take time. Me and Stephen Bancars is the one who's really featured in that. He takes time to lay out all of the evidence that we actually can substantiate, things that we know. But this is why it's so important to always post truthfully. Just recently, I'll give an example of this. Just recently, there was a picture going around, and people were saying that it was Chris Wallace with Jeffrey Epstein on Epstein Island, and that floated around a lot. It wasn't. The picture was actually George Clooney and Chris Wallace in Italy on Lake Como, and they were on vacation together because they're friends. But the reason that it got spread around like that was because it was right after the first presidential debate. Chris Wallace was obviously very biased in that debate against Trump, and people didn't like that. So somebody spread this rumor, and it just caught like wildfire. And so I went on my Facebook. Anytime it has to do with child sex trafficking, I'll do this. I don't do it with anything else, but with this I do, because I mean, it's literally life and death of children. I went on, and just everybody that I saw that shared it, I politely in the comment section correct and said, "Hey, just so you know, there's video evidence of Chris Wallace talking about this vacation. This has nothing to do with child sex trafficking. This is not Epstein, and we really shouldn't be posting stuff like this that we don't vet." And most people, and this is the good thing, most people, because I'm not out, I've accidentally shared stuff too. Actually, just today, I shared something about CERN that turned out to not be true, and somebody corrected me. So that happens. And most people, their attitude about it was great. They're like, "Oh, thank you for letting me know. We'll take it down." And they took it down. Great. But some people some people are in this whole thing for the wrong reason, and some people fought hard against me on that, and they were telling me it was up to me to prove that it's not real, which that's not a thing. The burden of proof is on the one who's making the claim.
Yeah.
So what happens is this type of stuff gets spread around, and it gives the mainstream media, the elite, it gives a lot of Americans who want to not get involved in this fight, it gives them fodder. It gives them something that they can point to and say, see, you're all sensationalists. You're all conspiracy theorists. You don't care about the truth. You don't care about these kids. You only care about clicks. You only care about views. You only care about growing your audience. And then they paint all of us with that brush. So when people do that, my credibility is hurt. Jaco Booyan's credibility is hurt. Your guys' credibilities are hurt. Just for even, so if we're even wanting to talk about this, even though you've had nothing to do with any of that, neither have I, but that it gives them an excuse. So when one of the main things that I try to tell people is when we have to post about it, but when you post, make sure you take a few seconds to vet it. Exactly. Chris Wallace thing was really easy it takes 2 seconds to Google it, and you could just see that it was George Clooney. I mean, it was really easy. Yeah. And if you don't have the time to vet it, then you don't have the time to share it. So, we need to uphold truth above sensationalism, and that is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And like you share in the movie that you didn't want to get involved with this. I mean, it wasn't like, yay, sex trafficking. I mean, it's not something. It's something we all just are not. We just don't want to believe. Right? This great country can have such a dark side. We don't. Like 80% of it is Americans, right? Involved. So we don't want to believe that. I mean, even yourself. I think you said in the movie, I didn't want to believe it, and a lot of your guests. People said, "We don't. This is not an exciting topic. I mean, you can't have a heart, be a Christian, have a heart for Christ, and say this is cool. I'm excited about it. You got to be like you said, the dark side of sex. I mean, it's painful. It's dark. It's scary. Like you said, you have kids. It's hard to believe that this could happen. And Tucson is one of the highest sex trafficking, or at least it was. Yes. And so it's like it's crazy, and just to believe that, it's just overwhelming sometimes. But like what the Bible says, we are to, as Paul said, we're to expose darkness. That's what our job as Christians is, to shine the light of Jesus, to speak the truth in love, and to let the chips fall where they may, right? And I was thinking earlier when you spoke about how people saying, don't say this, too hot. But Jesus said what? When you say for your audience, he said, woe to you when all men speak well of you, like they did the false prophets. So, I mean, isn't it funny? We all want everyone to love us, speak well of us, but Jesus says that's not a good thing, right? I mean, because that means you're probably compromising somewhere if everyone thinks you're great, right? Everyone thinks Josh Peck is the most awesome guy. He never says anything that offends me or hurts me or makes me angry. But if we're
then
like
I'm not doing my job.
Yeah, as long as it's truth. And it's offensive, right? Then that's great. Right. I mean, that's really Jesus say, yay. But if it's a mistruth or untruth, I should say, then that grieves the Holy Spirit, grieves God, because God is a God He is the truth, and we need to be of the truth. So, So anyways, I'm just saying is that it's shame. I don't really like to say this, but shame on pastors that are caring more about what the people in the seats think than what God thinks, right? The fear of man would prove to be a snare, but he who trusts in the Lord is kept safe. We need to trust in God and say, I will say and expose whatever it is you want, even if it costs me, right? Because a servant's not great as master. If Jesus died, then we could probably die, you know what I mean? Then there could be some throw or pushback on us, and we have to realize that's part of, right? Anyone who wants to live a godly life will suffer persecution. It's part of the gig.
Yeah,
absolutely. If Christ died for us, I can stand to lose some subscribers.
Amen.
I can stand to have a slightly smaller audience because what I'm saying is true. And that's the thing too. It's like, because this is something that I've learned a lot about people that, I was either not too close with before and now I'm really close with, or even things with people that I was close with and not so much, kind of going through this whole process, because doing this film really kind of opened my eyes to like a glimpse into the heart of people and what really motivates them and why they're really involved in what they're involved with. And I've had to break, I'm obviously not going to name any names, but I've had to break ties with some friends that I had because they're just not in it for truth. They're in it to build audiences. Yeah. And now building an audience can be a good thing in ministry, because if you have truth and you're proclaiming Jesus and you're where Jesus wants you to be, then building an audience is a great thing, because that's more people that, I'm on your show trying to build an audience because I want more people to know about this issue, to do something to help these kids, and I want help in that fight. So there's nothing like objectively wrong with that, but it's what is the reason? And I've had like friends where I've corrected them, behind the scenes and said, hey, that thing that you posted, that's actually not factually correct. Or I've even done publicly and comment, if they're posting something publicly, I can correct it publicly. But I always do it out of love. And there have been friends that I've had for a couple of years now that they're just done with me now. And it's like, well, okay, well that's fine, because like you said, I'm in trouble when people say, when everybody says well of me. So, but as long as I'm in the truth and the people around me are, that's how you know who you're really supposed to be fellowshipping with, who your real brothers and sisters in Christ are. If we can all unify in the truth, even if we disagree on some like points of doctrine, if we're unified in love and we're putting love and truth above all else and humility, that's how those differences, they don't really matter as much anymore, because whether so-and-so believes in a post-trib rapture and so-and-so believes in a pre-trib rapture, if they both have the love of Christ as higher than their opinions or their interpretations, which are fallible, they're subject to be fallible, then that's where we need to be. So that was like a big wake-up call for me through this process. And it's painful going through it, when you have people reject you over arbitrary things, but it's such a good... Yeah, it's such a good thing to happen. It's a good thing to happen, because not only does it humble you, but it tells you who you really can and can't trust, who you really are supposed to fellowship with, who your audience, if we can use that modern term, actually are. So all glory goes to God on that, and I'm happy to be serving Him.
I also think, Josh, like one thing too is like you'll hear, well, I got to get an audience and then I'll speak the hard things. But if you start off with compromise to kind of get butts in the seat, then it's gonna be real hard to all of a sudden say, now I'm gonna speak the hard truths to you. So it's kind of like you just got to speak the truth, right, and trust God to build, right. He's the one who builds the church. He's the one that builds the audience, right. And we don't want to do it through gimmicks or through I should say compromise, right? And the end justifies the means. The other thing I was saying, Josh, is you said something that if you're involved, 68% of all Christian men and women are like 57%, I think you said, and involved in pornography. Whenever I speak about pornography, I can see the whole congregation just get quiet. It's like, I don't know if you ever watched Lord of the Rings, where he goes, I'm not a conjurer of cheap chicks, and everything, the room gets dark. It's kind of like that. Whenever I speak about pornography, when you say 68% of all men struggle with pornography in the church, and 57%, I think, women. So when I speak about that, it gets kind of quiet at church. In our church, I speak pretty firmly most of the time. And so it's like you realize, like you said it really well, that if you're involved with that, you're indirectly supporting child, sex trafficking and child pornography, because that's all together. And that's got to be really hard, because then that means over half of our audience is saying, leave me alone, Josh. Don't tell me that, I don't want to hear this, because I don't want to feel more guilty than I already do for looking, right? If any Christian has got the Spirit in them, they're going to feel guilty looking at pornography, right? And I think any man who's honest can say we've all struggled with it. Before Christ, I was addicted to pornography. I was encouraged by my hippie aunt to look at it like she bought me a stack of Playboys, and you know what I mean? So it was like, I thought I was raised, it was normal to just look at pornography. It's just healthy. And you hear that, right? I mean, I would love that where here Ted Bundy's saying how he got involved. He started looking at Playboys, and it went harder. Then it was snuff films, right? He said that to Dobson. And then I love the psychologists say, oh, that has nothing. That's healthy. That doesn't do anything. Yet these same people spend millions of dollars for the Super Bowl commercial because, right, looking at stuff has no influence on us at all. But I mean, it's just so goofy. But can you speak to that? I mean, because that's got to be really hard too, because just when I speak about pornography with not all the details that I can watch the congregation just kind of freeze a little bit, because you can see the guilt. And even though I'm not trying to condemn, I'm just saying, guys, this is going to hurt your marriage. It's going to hurt your kids. And I can tell you tons of stories I've heard, but can you talk to that and just how kind of like you really need to deal with that, because it is going to kind of open doors to worse things.
Yeah. And first, I want to say to anybody who is struggling with this, I love you. I'm not condemning you, but I am going to tell you the absolute truth. If you view pornography even one time, you are supporting child sex trafficking and child pornography. And I am perfectly fine to be the one to take that ignorance away from you. And I can explain how that works. But I think, one of the best ways to get rid of this addiction is to see it for what it actually is. See it in the light of truth. Because right now, I bet to the people out there that are addicted, men and women that are addicted to porn, they're thinking that it's their own secret thing. They're only affecting themselves. It's not, maybe their wife doesn't know. It's not affecting their wife. They're able to manage their life just fine and do this from time to time, and it doesn't really affect anything, and it's just theirs. So I would encourage you then to ask yourself, why do you still feel guilt over it then, if that's the case? And if you don't feel guilt, have you done it for so long that your conscience has now been seared? Because that's a problem too. I would encourage you to look into, it's really easy to do. Just Google these words: the connection between pornography and child sex trafficking. Google those words, and you're going to get article after article after article. You're going to get a long list of articles, and I want you to sit down and read those. Start with one and read it. And if you're committed, read all that you can find, and you will learn to hate pornography because you're starting to see it in the light of truth. You're not seeing it through your filtered vision anymore. You're not seeing it through your excuses and all of that. You're not seeing it through your sin nature. You're seeing it through the truth of what it actually is, how it perpetuates child sex trafficking. It encourages it. This is pornography. The proliferation of pornography in our culture is a big reason why child sex trafficking is as big as it is today. And I can talk about that a little bit, what those connections are. It has a lot to do with feeding the market for it, but I really want to encourage people to go and read that for yourselves, because that is therapeutic. It will teach you to hate pornography. That's how you're going to get out of it. And in a good way, it's going to teach you to hate that part of yourself that's addicted to it. That doesn't mean that you hate yourself as a whole. You are redeemed by the blood of Christ if you're a Christian. So you don't have to hate yourself, but those parts of you, those parts of your old man that haven't died yet, those need to be hated and taken care of. And you are fully with Jesus at your side. With Jesus, you have the power to do that. So the way to do it is to look at it for what it is, recognize it for what it is, and just follow that journey along with the guidance of Jesus, and he'll get you through it. It might take a little while, but he'll get you through it.
Amen. I
like too what you said. I don't know if it was a movie or I heard you on an interview, but you were saying how that, like cuties with Netflix, how we vote, your dollar is the most powerful, besides prayer.
Yes.
But your dollar, if you say, I'm canceling my subscription, if enough Christians say that, but, I always joke with Netflix, when I had Netflix a long time ago, it was like, what's the least worst show I can watch, right? It wasn't, woo. I mean, I guess there's a few Christian shows, but most of the time it was, what's the least sinful show I can watch and not feel the Holy Spirit totally grieved, you know what I mean? And it's like, and now with cuties, and they're saying, oh, this is so good. It's for women. I forget this one, whoever said it, the producer, it's to just freedom and liberty. I forget what you said of women. It was just ridiculous. But you see these, I watched the 1 second video of it, and you got little kids grinding on the floor. It's just like, how can you be, it's like, Black Lives Matter. What about children's lives matter? How can that be a healthy thing and a good thing? And so maybe you can talk on that about how we vote with our dollar. Don't support pornography. Don't look at, movies, like you said. Don't watch sexually explicit movies. To just really, we have power if we just say no. And we don't like to be a cancel culture, but definitely with pornography or anything sexually explicit, we should be a cancel culture, right? When
it comes to pure sin, we absolutely should be canceling that in our own lives. A lot of the reason people don't like cancel culture is because they don't like being preached at by hypocrites, because that is what you see on the left. The people who are usually involved in cancel culture kind of stuff, they're hypocrites. But with things like cancel Netflix, that's not a hypocritical thing. That was with people who are saying, we are not supporting Netflix. The focus was on the company that manufactured this horrible movie. It wasn't on other people. It wasn't on each other. So it wasn't a hypocritical thing. But and you'd really see how flimsy those excuses were that Netflix gave and that these producers gave, because they said things like, well, we're trying to shine a light on the sexual exploitation of children. And you know what I say to that? Yeah. I made a movie shining a light on the sexual exploitation of children, and I did not have to sexually exploit one child to do it. You know, it's such a flimsy, weak excuse, but it's the best that they have. So that's where they're at now.
And it's
as
demonic,
far as like,
because Josh, I heard
Yes.
a guy once who's the excuse of a child molester was, "I'm just showing you what no one else should do to you." So it's the same kind of baloney argument.
Exactly. It's the same thing that the enemy will use, and these pedophiles and abusers will use. And then as far as our voting with our dollar, and because believe me, I get it. There's a lot of stuff that Christian media, like Christian entertainment, a lot of it is very corny, and I don't want to criticize it too much, but I mean, we all know it. You know, a lot of it is just not entertaining. It's just it's corny, it's cringy. A lot of it. And so, you know, I was before this film, I was stuck in this kind of space for a while where I was like, well, you know, I mean, there's just no good entertainment. So what am I supposed to do? And it's like, it's such an obvious thing now. It's like, well, what's more important? You know, the safety of a child or my entertainment? You know, so it's like, if you're subscribed to something like Netflix that is actually putting out child porn, and they're being indicted over it now, and you're giving your money to that company, I mean, that should be a big wake up call. And, you know, something that I thought was powerful, just some random person on Facebook said, you know, I don't want to judge anybody, but I would feel very scared if I still had my Netflix subscription, knowing that I'm going to have to explain that to God someday. I'm like, that's how we should be looking at
for them to fight, to be able to continue this, right? To be able to fight that.
And other things too that I've seen with like the young youth at our church and stuff is even YouTube or TikTok and all these things, or Twitter especially, like there's pornography, and you've talked about it too. It was, I think, in the documentary, but that's what's scary is it's like that verse that talks about Satan disguises himself as an angel of light, and it looks fun, it looks good, entertaining, but that's what we're realizing is, no, there's children who are being put in cages, who are being tortured and, you know, raped, molested. And for me, like it is a serious topic, because I've seen so many young girls who have come to me and stuff who have been molested or raped, and how much it affects them. And it just breaks my heart. Like, even, is it what was her name? Iyanka?
Oh, Ilanka Deaton. Yeah.
Her story, that's just to listen to her story, if that's one of the reasons to buy it, and just that to break your heart, like that is just one thing where it was something as simple as just driving alone with, I think, her music teacher. And that's for us, we always encourage families to be very careful, you know, making sure their child or anyone, you know, teach them to not be alone with the opposite sex, to be very careful, like sleepovers, all these things that people say, no, that's weird. But we've heard countless stories, maybe it's just us growing up in the church, of things happening to kids, and then they don't share it because they're told, if you share this, we will kill your parents, we will kill your family members, so you can't share it. And how demonic it is, because these kids are just tormented, traumatized, and then they start doing other things, like to themselves or to other children, like they are hurt, so then they hurt others. And that's why for us, like, we believe, like you were saying, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities. Like, that's where I'm just thankful that we are exposing the sin, even especially of pornography, or just anything. People, I think, just think pornography is looking at Pornhub, like going on Pornhub. It's also the movies you watch, YouTube videos, because our culture is just over-sexualized. Like, you can just, like, you can just be on Instagram and there's pornography. Like, it's so bad. And that's where we also encourage people, for us, we have different blocks on our phones, like Accountable to You, or just different things, like, to do that if you can't get rid of it, to have accountability, to go to church, get that discipleship, get that accountability, how important that is. And like you're saying, we can't just trust the government. It starts in the homes. It starts in the families. The families need to say, oh, they can't say boys will be boys. No, if they know their son or any of their children are looking at pornography or struggling with that, they need to take, you know, drastic steps and boundaries. And like for us growing up, everyone made fun of us because we never had a phone. We couldn't like do sleepovers. We couldn't be around people. Like all these things, but now I'm thankful seeing what
We
my
could be around
friends,
people who just couldn't be
seeing what my
alone.
friends went through, and now like just the stronghold and the oppression, and they've needed deliverance and different things and counseling. And so there's hope, but at the same time, that verse that says, sorry, I know I'm talking a lot, but the verse that says, I think it's Mark 9:42. But if you cause one of these little ones to stumble, it'll be better for you to have a large millstone tied around your neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. So right there, it's showing us how important, like, we have such an influence in what we say and what we allow. And if we just give our little 2-year-old a tablet with no protection, like kids at, I think Josh McDowell was saying, at age of 3 are watching pornography and are exposed to that.
Yeah, the average age right now, and it's going down, but the average age is 9 years old. And that's horrifying, because that means half of the kids that see pornography for the first time are under 9. So, 3 years old, 4 years old, it just depends who they're around, who their friends are, where they go for sleepovers, like you said, what kind of church they go to, because no place is safe. And this is part of the problem too. There's too many people in the country that want to point a finger at one group or another. Well, it's the Catholics, that they have a problem with that, or it's the Muslims. Yeah, it's a human problem. You find it everywhere. You find it in every group of people. It's a human problem. So instead of wasting time, focusing on which group is doing it worse, we all need to realize it is a human problem. And if I was born with just a little bit different brain chemistry or with a little bit different situation growing up, I could have easily been one of those. So could you. So could have anybody watching. We could have been having to struggle with that. So we need to realize how dark and depraved the human heart can actually be without Jesus. And once we realize that in ourselves, we're going to have a lot easier time turning away from that, because again, we're shedding it, we're seeing it in the light of truth. And when we do that, I mean, it gives us honesty and humility. It gives us all these good things, but it'll make it easier for us to follow Christ and teach others to do the same thing.
And it's also, like Paul says, flee youthful lusts, give no opportunity for the flesh. A lot of times we think, that's right. Because I mean, I can't watch do a lot of Fox News online, because even at the end of the article, you'll have some weird thing, mom and daughter, you're like, what does this have to do with Fox News? And it just makes you so angry, because as I said, before Christ, I was very addicted to pornography since, age probably 12. I was given Playboys and stuff. I was in a liberal household. But I mean, so it's like that took a lot, and that's still that I can feel that propensity, that thing, some people say demonic oppression, but so I have to really take safeguards, because I know, and I think, like Paul, when I'm weak, then I'm strong. Like, I don't counsel alone with a woman, because I know, it's like, I think the way we're strong is to know, like you said, we're weak. Right. So not say, I'll never do that. The minute pride of a man will bring him low, but a man of lowly spirit will find honor. I mean, when you think I can't struggle with this, or I would never do that, I mean, you know what I mean? Your flesh will take you places you don't want to go. Right. I mean, so the best way to do is not to feed it, to crucify it, like we're told in Galatians 2:20. That's what we're not to coddle the flesh, we're to buffet it, as Paul also says, is to say, hey, I'm not going to give a place for this. And it's, with the internet, it's such a blessing in some ways, but such a curse, because I forget, someone said 1/3 of all internet stuff is pornography, is pornographic in nature. So, I mean, you got to really be vigilant to not be exposed to it.
Yeah.
That's right.
So the other thing that we want to talk about is why it's called the darker side of trafficking, because it's all bad. Like, we know that. And I like how you're saying it. It's not like you're saying anything is,
good about it. Yeah. There's a lighter side of the
but the occult and the ritual abuse that's being done, and especially what's going on right now in October, especially here in Tucson,
Satanism.
we have a mountain, Mount Lemmon. There's like animals that people see that are like sacrificed and different things, and all these different spells and weird things. But to watch, I don't think we'll have time to discuss this, but with Jeffrey Epstein and all that, there was a ton of occult stuff and different things that people just don't want to believe. But you can watch that obviously in the documentary. But for us, we want to talk about how, like, it says occult efforts to use children as sacrifice. It talks about for also ancient bloodthirsty entities. Like, that's what we realize too. It's like there's spiritual side of it, like blood sacrificing, especially they believe, I want you to talk about this hopefully, for younger children. They believe that there's more like
energy release.
energy and different things. So why do people, because we know that a lot of people just want to believe, no, it's just bad. Like, we know there's pedophiles, but can you talk more about the spiritual side of it and how it?
Because I really like you said, I like
yeah.
how you really tied that in a balanced way, how it's not just perverts that are doing this. There's demonic with it, and how it's I just couldn't, because a lot of times, as I told you, we saw the Halloween movie of Chuck Smith saying how there's Satanists sacrificing children, and how there's women that are breeders to breed children to be sacrificed, and you know all about the energy. If maybe you can share that for the audience, but just how it really ties together, because you can think, oh, these perverts, they need to be shot, they need to be killed, but you realize, really, yes, they're responsible for their actions, but really it's the enemy.
It's also just
that's
doctors.
Taken
it's
them.
not even crazy people. It's like normal people, like doctors,
senators,
teachers, like people who have influence with children. So, like, we just think, oh, our children are fine. Let's just keep them away from the creepy looking people. They're teachers even. Like, so we want you to share about that. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times these people will purposely get involved in various forms of childcare just so they can be, and that's why a lot of times when we hear a story, about a pedophile that got caught or somebody that killed a kid or something, a lot of times they're a youth leader at a church, or they're a kindergarten teacher, or they're a babysitter. They're always like they're literally attracted to kids, and so we find them in those areas. That's why we as parents got to be incredibly careful. And so with the occult ties, some people ask, how do we even know that this is real? Because in the movie, we admit that most of what we know about these occult ties is from eyewitness testimony. There's not, as far as I know, to my knowledge, there's not actual verified video evidence, because typically what happens when there is evidence, it gets shut down. Like in the Finder's case, it gets redacted. There were other items of undisclosed occult ritual evidence, so we don't know what that is. So a lot of times it gets shut down. So all we have is the eyewitness accounts, but then a lot of times the eyewitnesses don't feel comfortable talking about it. I mean, it's not like our culture really does a whole lot to make these people feel real comfortable to come out and talk openly about this stuff. So how do we actually know that occult groups are buying children for sacrificial purposes? Part of this is common sense. We know that there absolutely are evil groups totally dedicated to Satan in this country. There always have been since the dawn of man, but we know that there are people who take that stuff seriously, even if we don't believe it. Like, even if we were to say, well, yeah, but all that's not real. All right, it doesn't matter if we believe it or not. Yeah. They do. They believe it. And we also know that there are people that sell children. Yeah. There are traffickers that exist, and they don't care what anyone does with these kids that they're selling. They only care about money. So it's really just putting these two things together. Of course, these occultists would go to a child trafficker to find a child who's already been kidnapped in order to perform their ritual. Now, sometimes they do just kidnap kids off the street. That can happen, but the more like technology is advancing, more and more they'll just go to a trafficker who already has children for sale and who doesn't care what they do with the kids. So more and more the occultists will go to these traffickers, which also makes it really hard to trace. And we can also be confident that it's actually happening because of the independently corroborated testimonies of the survivors, who might not talk to the public, but they will talk to counselors or advocates of victims, several of which we have in the film, and we actually have 2 SRA advocates and experts in the movie. And we have even more in the bonus materials at skywatchtvstore.com. We even have a satanic ritual abuse survivor who's an research or an investigator now, and he works with victims and stuff because of what happened to him. And again, we couldn't get him in the film because of COVID travel restrictions, but we do have an interview with him in the bonus features available at skywatchtvstore.com. If people
is it still get the film $35 there, for the 5 videos?
Yeah.
Still can get it?
Yes, it's a $35 donation, and once again, I'll repeat what I said before that. All the profits go to Whispering Ponies Ranch, which is a place where kids go to heal after being rescued from child sex trafficking. They can go there and learn how to heal and live a normal life. It's a wonderful ministry. It's a Christian ministry, so all the profits go there. But yeah, if people get the film at skywatchtvstore.com, they don't only get the film Silent Cry, but they also get a bunch of different DVDs with it that aren't available anywhere else. And I'll say too, if people get it there, or if they stream it on Amazon, which you can do as well, please leave a review on Amazon and IMDb, because this is one way that we can tell Amazon that, you know, this is the kind of thing that we want to see. We want to get Silent Cry in their new release categories, and we want Amazon to start suggesting it to their users, to their viewers. And if they do that, this can go far really fast. So that's what we're hoping for. I don't know what that magic number of reviews, you know, that a movie needs to have before Amazon has enough confidence to start suggesting it. But I've already started to just now see it at the bottom of some lists. So that's good. It means that they're getting put in lists. So we need a lot more reviews. If you feel we've earned 5 stars, please give us 5 stars and tell us why. If not, give us what you feel we've earned and tell us why. So of course we want people to be honest in their reviews, but it would help.
Also, can you share, I mean, not for sensationalism, but it really hit me about, since Jeffrey Epstein is in the thing, and then Maxwell's, you know, will she make it to next summer's thing? We don't know. But it's like that, just how it hit me, how you just think this guy is a big financier, rich guy, just likes young women, you know, he's just a weirdo. But how in the film you tied how all the pagan symbols, all the goddesses and gods and all the weird stuff. And then on another show with Tom Horn, it said that they found bones and right off his island in the sea. So I mean, it's just, I mean, if you can, not for sensationalism, but just to show how somebody just in the news, how you have, isn't it ironical that you have all these pagan symbols, and where there's even the Librith or whatever, where they sacrifice children, and the big berm thing, and just how you're like, no, are you serious? But then you also say the average lifespan of a sex trafficked child is like 7 years old, and probably, I'm thinking, right, these girls get to be like, I don't know who it was. I was watching the 60-minute Australian thing with Epstein last night, and they were saying, why didn't he like Maxwell? Because she was older than 12 years old. So I mean, and she kind of laughed at it, even though it's not funny, but you get the point. So it's like, after these girls probably hit 16, 17, 18, they're pretty much saying, you're used good, you're no good to us, right? So why not sacrifice them, or at least just kill them to get, so, you know, dead men tell no tales. So can you share kind of on that?
Yeah, so the Epstein Island thing, we have a bonus audio series that has hours of information from Dr. Thomas Horn about all of that. I can hit on some points here. There were several things that were found on Epstein's orgy island showing that he most likely had direct ties to the occult, which probably played a part in his abuse of children. One of the most obvious is the temple that most people are familiar with, but there's also drone footage that we include in the film that shows a giant sundial with 13 chairs pointing to runes stones. There's gods and goddesses statues all over the place. There's a giant green man from ancient, antiquity. There's labyrinths, which connects with child sacrifice according to ancient mythology. And we see certain symbols that are repeated on Epstein's Zorro Ranch in New Mexico as well. So there's a giant rectangle berm area on the island that bore the same symbols on his Zorro Ranch. 4 paths leading to a circle with a square in the middle of it. Now, what's really strange is images on the island were captured in 2013, images of the island in 2013 of this berm area on the island showing these symbols. But in 2017, this would have been around the time investigators were starting to close in on Epstein, and Epstein was probably getting nervous. There was this really sloppy effort made to cover up these symbols by Bill. Yeah, and we show the images in the film, and if you look at this thing, I mean, you would break your legs trying to play a game of tennis on this thing. There's peaks and valleys, and
it's even
crooked.
The lines, at least on the drone thing, it's like it's all crooked, like it was just done by chalk or light. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a rush job, and it was to cover the symbols. So it's like, why do they want the symbols covered, and then everything else was kind of left alone? And then in 2019, more pictures were taken, and the whole thing was removed.
Wow.
The whole thing was taken out. So the reason is ancient occult sites discovered around the world have used that same pattern that was in that Burma area. The Egyptians, the human sacrificing Mayans, 4 paths leading to a circle encompassing a square. Like if you look at like the temple of an ancient Mayans from the top down, you see that same pattern where they would sacrifice humans. So quite literally, whether it's purely decorative, and I don't think it is, but whether it was purely decorative,
And why would you hide it if it
not,
was just decorative, right? Yeah.
Why would you? Exactly. So Jeffrey Epstein had at least 2 occult areas dedicated to human sacrifice, one on his island and one on his ranch, where he and his high-powered friends are known to have gathered. So it leads us to ask the question, what were they doing there? Why did they cover up those symbols, but they didn't get rid of the sundial? They didn't get rid of the 13 chairs or the rune stones. It was mainly that area. So I think something really dark happened there, and I think there might have been evidence, there, and that's why it was covered up. But again, we get into a lot more of that in the Epstein's Orgy Island audio series available with the movie.
And Josh, real quick, I don't know if you want to get into this, but just real quick to explain to those that are going, what are you talking about? It's just, but the belief is, right, if people are involved in the occult or Satanism, that if you the sacrifice, I'm told, right, help me out if I'm wrong, but the younger, the more energy released. I mean, Anton LaVey said that. Yeah. I mean, what's his name? The guy who's the old guy, Aleister Crowley, that there's an energy released, and they can vampirism on it, where they just absorb it and they believe it'll please the demonic or their false deities, which are really demons, and then they'll get power, right? I mean, so it's about power.
Yeah, the more innocent a child is, they believe, the more it venerates their false gods, the more, really it's demons we're talking about, but the more it venerates their false gods, and the more favor these false gods will look upon them, maybe blessing them with powers or things like that. So that's why they're doing it. But that's also why you see like Satanists really, really, really involved in the pro-choice movement. Again, it's the slaughter of the innocent. The more innocent, the better. So that's and really
let's
what
be
they're
real.
after.
I mean, thank God for people like you exposing this darkness. But let's be real. Jeffrey Epstein got away with this for a long time. I mean, look at the 2007, right? They just got a slap on the wrist. You can't prosecute us anymore. I mean, and then Clinton's involvement. You don't want to talk about that, but it's like, it's just nuts. Yep. The friends he had, Prince Andrew. I mean, it's just like, so it wasn't just some little dark corner with some weird guys in trench coats, but this is like people, highest offices, queen, son, second son. I mean, just nuts. And it's like you said, it's almost so overwhelming, you can't believe it. But the key is what's really behind this: Satan, who wants to steal, kill, and destroy. And doesn't care how he does it. He doesn't care who he does. But it seems like Satan and demon worship tends to like younger, more innocent children. Because, right, and I think that's why, like Mariah quoted, why Jesus said, if you cause one of these little ones to stumble, I mean, think about it. He's basically telling you, it's better you commit suicide and end your life than to face me on the day of judgment if you continue in this. So, I mean, and you think Epstein kind of got off easy, but you got to remember, but God. He's standing before God, and there's no getting off. And I love the verse in Hebrews 4:13, everything is laid bare before the eyes of the Lord, to whom we must give an account. So Epstein's having his day in court, and I'm absolutely sure he's losing right now. So,
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
I agree.
And for us, we really want to be able to encourage parents and just different people to really not just listen to this and be like, oh, that's cool, but to make sure that now you're aware of, certain movies, TV shows, your kids on social media or different things. And also we want to speak against even things like the LGBTQ community, and everyone wants to accept that. But then I saw in the video, there was this lady on this TED Talk basically saying like pedophiles and stuff, like basically that's
it's in their DNA.
In their DNA, they can't help it. And so in us accepting different things the way God didn't intend it for one man and one woman, then it just keeps getting worse. Like sin grows, like it talks about a little leaven. So if you just allow a little sin and just think it's okay, leaven's a whole lump. Like it'll just grow and grow and grow. And I just wanted to throw this out there really quickly. For us, we
like to talk, Josh.
Yeah, but we encourage families to also be careful allowing their children to celebrate Halloween, because it says, what does light have in common with darkness? Like, we shouldn't be around that, because we've watched, it's called Trick or Treat, and it's with Chuck Smith with Calvary, and he talks about there was this boy and he was part of this occult stuff, and Halloween day was the day that he had to like basically
Take the Athami.
put into a young girl and kill her, and they raped her. She was like the white virgin, and all this stuff happened on that day. And so it sickens him that families and churches even are celebrating this holiday, where that is where children are being sacrificed, and obviously animals, everyone knows that and stuff. But instead of worrying about, because more people care about if they hear an animal died than a child, right? And speak up against abortion. And so all these things, we just encourage people, like, that's why there are things, I think they hear this and they get overwhelmed, like, oh, like you said, they just want to say, oh, it's just a conspiracy, so we don't have to deal with it. But no, there are documents, there are truths. So watch Silent Cry, because that, like you say, it makes it where you can no longer say, oh, I didn't know. And maybe if that's why right now you're hearing, oh, that's why I don't want to watch it, you already know just from watching this. So we encourage everyone to buy the DVD set. It's $35, but it's nothing going to Josh, like it's going to Whispering Ponies Ranch. So we encourage everyone to, that's a way you can help. Leave a 5-star review on Amazon and IMBD, or is that what's called? And then, yeah, we'll just do that. Anything else you would like to share?
Since we like to talk a lot, we'll let you.
Well, oh, no, that's not a problem at all. Well, I just echo what you said. I want to encourage people viewing to make today be the first day that you decide you're not going to be a part of the problem anymore, because there is no such thing as a fence. There is no fence sitting. You're either part of the problem or part of the solution, and inactivity is where the abusers want you, because they don't want you standing in their way. So if you're inactive, you're letting them on by, and you're giving the country over to them and the country's children. So I would say, let this be the first day that you decide, you know what, I'm going to be a part of the solution starting today. Me and my family, we're going to make some changes, and we're going to let Jesus lead us in that. So I'll just end with that. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's been a pleasure talking with you too.
Thank you so much for joining us on Calvary Conversations. If you haven't already, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video. If you like to listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, just type in Calvary Conversations. Also, make sure to follow us on Instagram at Calvary Conversations. Thanks so much, and God bless.